Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Half and Half this morning. I am in the studio without Scott, but I can't say specifically on my own because there are a couple cats here, one staring off the screen to another. You may have noticed I didn't put the physio ball there because Biddy has been known to be upstaging of me sometimes. So hopefully there will be fewer cat distractions, or maybe sadly, there will be fewer cat distractions. We have been working, last week we started a strength and flow series, and we worked on the core and talked about the core. And today I wanted to bring in some ideas with upper body strength and upper body connection. So arms, shoulders, and upper abs. From a Pilates perspective, for sure, the arms are very connected into this upper ab connection. And how we work with that sometimes we call rib connection, of pulling that together. And that if you're supported from this upper abdominal place, you're less likely to try and hold your arm strength from your neck, right? So we balance above and below through the center, and that's what gives support for the limbs. Sometimes in anatomy, they talk about the axial skeleton, the axis, which is kind of the spine, the rib cage, pelvis, and then the appendicular, the appendages, which is the shoulder girdle reaching out to the fingers, and then parts of the pelvis all the way down through the feet. So the sense of having a real core support to create more stability to move the arms. Pilates is really based on that idea. So I have 2-pound weights. We can do small weights. I was thinking we'd play with rotator cuff a little bit. Those are smaller muscles, so smaller weights are better at getting into that. You could also do it with no weights at all. Or you could grab a can of beans or can of soup or can of tomatoes um, and work that way as well. And then I also have my strap, and so a kitchen towel also works for that. Hopefully you have a kitchen because it sounds like you need a lot of kitchen-based items to do this class. So we'll get started with that now. I'm going to move this out of the way again so we have fewer cat problems. And come up to standing here. So first thing I want to look at is how the forearm can often hold tension, and the tension in the forearm can go up into the shoulder and into the neck. So sometimes we're doing everything right in the shoulder, but just tightness through the forearm keeps us from being able to really access what we want. And generally, we don't feel tense in the forearms. People don't wake up and like try to figure out how to stretch their forearms, right? Um, it's just a harder place to feel. But it is most of us are tense in our forearms. Just from grabbing, a lot of the forearm muscles are grabbing and holding and typing and turning a doorknob and opening a can of soup. I'm really into soup right now. Yeah, just any of those things. So a lot of the tension is just kind of there. There's a motion in the forearm called, a special motion in the forearm called pronation and supination, a pair of motions. And it means that my hand can flip. My forearm can flip without changing my upper arm and my elbow. This is different than medial rotation of the shoulder, where the whole shoulder turns in and out that way. So that's one movement. And then also a different movement is when I just flip my forearm. That's called pronation and supination. Those two things often get like stuck together. Maybe we don't pronate all that well, or we don't supinate all that well. And when we get to about here, we start like tensing up the shoulder to turn the arm, right? Or moving the shoulder blade to flip the palm open. So that movement right there, being able to isolate that movement starts to kind of grease up the forearm muscles. So you could do this sitting or standing. I'm standing right now, but you could be sitting if you want. And you're just going to place elbows together, palms together, forearms together. And then wherever it's comfortable, I'm just going to go on the diagonal so you can still see my face. Wherever it's comfortable to have your elbows is fine. But see if they can touch. Fine if they can't. But bring your forearms towards each other. And if your elbows can touch, great. My shoulder blades come wide. My chest gets a little closed off. That's just fine for this movement here. And then you're just going to flip. So now one of my, I can see the back of one of my hands, and I'm going to flip it around to see the back of my other hand. So my elbows or side by side. But every time I flip the hand, my wrist is now front to back, right? So I'm getting a twist in the forearm and rotating. I'm just going back and forth, trying to keep the forearms together, trying to keep the elbows together, the hands together. Maybe you notice one way goes better than the other. Trying to keep the shoulders relaxed as you do it. And then take a flip one way and do a little stretch up in the elbows, in the arms. Let that come up, still elbows together. See how far that goes. Then flip the other hand in front and do a little like stretch up, opening your back, and then draw the elbows back down. So play with that movement a little. See if your upper back can open a little more. So now we add in a little bit of shoulder to the forearm. Maybe it opens your back and you breathe a little better. And then let that go for a moment. Check it out. So it's phase one. We're going to look at phase two. We're going to look at the wrist. So wrist, I'm going to go hand to hand. So now everything's in the same line, right? So side here, and then clasp together. And then we're just going to work with the side to side movement in the wrist. Now in this one, notice like as the hand goes over, my elbow slides up, and then they come back together, and then the other elbow slides up. So you're going to let the forearms slide against each other to go back and forth. And like, don't get too macho about it, right? Like, it's not a big deal. Just be like really relaxed. You don't have to pull super hard to get your arm over. See if you can let it flop. Maybe you pull a little bit to give it a stretch, but mostly trying to release and not create more tension, right? So just flop it over side to side. And then let that go. So we're going to combine those two movements. Last thing we'll do with the forearms here, making little figure eights with the hands. So clasp the hands, draw the elbows together, go to the side, and then flip the forearm so the hands are facing away. Come up and over and rotate it around the other way. Up and over, rotate the hands around the other way. Up and over, rotate around. So I've got that wrist movement, that sliding of the elbows, and then that flipping of the forearms. And once you get it, it sort of feels like a figure eight, right? You can kind of smooth it out. If that's making you lose the coordination of it, slow it down again. And then if you're feeling very talented, you could try reversing the direction. So it goes up and over towards the screen, and then around towards you, and up and over towards the screen and around towards your face. And then shake all that out. Just kind of circle your shoulders around. And then see how that feels. All right, so from here, we're going to take your strap or towel. We're going to bring it up so your elbows are in line with your waist, and then your hands are supinated. That's the palm up position. Hands are supinated. I just have the strap loosely draped over the palm of my hand, and my thumb can grab it if I need to, which I will at different points. Use that thumb to create some tension. So first, just kind of like an easy serving tray, like holding a serving tray with a really open palm. Then close the thumb by the palm of the hand. Now you might notice, like, just make that thumb movement a couple times. Can you feel the more you press the thumb into your hand, just that little bit of forearm tension that shows up? That's normal. That's part of what happens. But just like observe what that is, and then see how much do you really need. I think there's a lot of us that have some arthritis in our thumbs. That's a really common place to have arthritis. So how much are you grabbing in the thumb, or could you think about the thumb being a little longer, not grabbing too hard? And then from there, once you have that, you're going to keep that closure of the thumb. And then you're going to do a little pull out, and that pull out feels like my elbows are pulling in as my hands are pulling out. And then I'm thinking about some work around the shoulder blade and around the back of the shoulder and maybe even the tricep, and then let it all go. And then do a little pull out. Think of activating the upper back. So really what's happening is I'm doing like a little turn in the shoulder now, right? I'm thinking of that happening in the shoulder. And that movement starts to isometrically turn those rotator cuff muscles on. So just pulling out and release a few times. And if you can, noticing the distinction of the forearms, the back of the shoulder. You could do this without the strap too. Just isolate those muscles. Now get that little bit of tension on the strap. And then we're going to keep all this the same. You're going to take your elbows up and then bring them back into your waist. So I keep a little bit of that tension on the strap. I want to keep pulling my elbows in line with my shoulders, right? They don't sneak out this way, right? Coming in, and I come up and back down. So forearm supinated, upper arm thinking of rotating, and then this is called shoulder flexion, bringing it up, isolating all those different connections. You might go up a little higher, but if going up higher spreads your elbows or arches your back, don't go up higher. Like, see what you can do without tipping your chest backwards or spreading your elbows. It's kind of a weird movement. It's like the opposite of the movements we usually do, which is why it's good for you, but also why it's awkward. One more time, trying to keep the upper back open, especially if you get a little higher. And then relax all that down. All right, so we're going to take some of that down to the mat. So you can find any old way to the mat. And then maybe a little awareness from your palm to your forearm, to your shoulder, to your upper back, right? Like that's the goal. So we just did like this movement, basically. We're kind of making that movement. Now we're going to take the opposite movement to take hands behind your head. So everything that we just did is kind of flipping, right? To go hands behind the head. But actually it's still muscles around the same parts. So we'll notice what that's like. So sitting up first, take the palms down to start, and then just like bend your elbows wide and see if you can feel your back wide as the elbows go out. And like this long reach from the chest to the upper back, easy, relaxed hands and forearms. And then floating your hands behind your head. And as you float your hands behind your head, your elbows are wider than they were in the last exercise, but they still come forward a little. So the upper back really open. The elbows have kind of an out and forward feeling. I can feel that all the way to my shoulder blades getting wider. And then my hands, again, there's like an open feeling in my hands. I'm not gripping my thumb. I'm not gripping my forearms. I just feel like this soft, open palm on my head. Now, your choice. You can come down to your back and then refine this position. Or a little more challenging, you could try to keep this position in your upper back and roll down to the floor, keeping your hands as they are. But if you know that you can't roll down with control very easily, then just make your way down and find that position again. So this nice open upper back, elbows lengthening out, ribs drawing together, and easy, non-gripping hands. And then you know what's next. So we do a little mini crunch coming up, and then lowering back down. Now think of the tricep muscles. Think of the muscles in the upper back of the shoulder. Think of a nice loose flow in your forearm and your hands. And then bring your head up. You don't change that to bring your head up because you're using your upper abdominals to bring your head up, right? Maybe you're using some triceps. But you can keep all that upper back work really open. A couple more. And last one. And then relax everything down. Let's go palms open, chest open. Breathe through your chest and your upper back and your armpits. And let the palms of your hands relax and your fingers and your thumb relax. Your forearms relax. And then, however you like, find a way up to sitting. And then let's flip over onto your hands and knees. So I kept talking about those open palms, right? And nice flow in the forearms. So lots of us, when we get on our hands and knees, the wrists hurt, right? We get into the wrist, maybe your thumb hurts and you feel that thumb arthritis thing, or whatever you feel in your thumb if you have stuff in your thumb. And the forearm doesn't make that any better, right? A tense forearm does not help that situation at all. It's sometimes the cause of the situation, not always, but it certainly doesn't help things to have your forearms really tight. So in this position here, I have my hands a little in front of my shoulders. I'm going to think of my palms as open as they can be. And just take a moment, kind of like you do when you lie on your back and you fidget a little bit with your pelvis. I know I do. Maybe you do that too. Like let your hands kind of spread out until they feel pretty open. You might not feel the whole hand on the floor, but just let it open up as much as it will. So it feels pretty spread out. And again, my shoulders are behind my hands. That puts less pressure on my wrist. Just see if you could imagine the wrist spreads out just like the palm spreads out, the heel of the hand spreads out. We're going to keep that little bit of bend in the elbow. Notice your hands are pronated, right? That palm down position. Now, all the time, I might say, you've probably heard me say, take your elbows a little wide, a little bit to the side, and not straight to the back. And that just eases up some of the tension that can be there in pronation. It asks me not to have to, it means that I don't have to pronate quite as much. If my elbows point straight back, I really have to pronate a lot. A lot of us don't have that kind of range. So the elbow's a little bit out to the side, and then that eases up on some of the forearm tension. Lets my upper back open a little more. And then I'm going to slowly bring myself forward, shoulders over hands now, to wherever's comfortable, right? If it's too much on your wrist to have shoulders over hands, be a little behind that. See if you can keep the feeling of a wide palm, wide elbow, a flowing forearm, and then a wide shoulder blade, upper back. Imagine you could broaden your shoulders a little bit, and that would engage your triceps. Right? Maybe you can feel that work through there. And then from here, I'm just going to play a little bit with shifting the legs. So I'm going to reach my right leg out and up off the floor, and then back down and in under my hip. Now, you've probably done this before. Nothing really new. I'm going to switch to my left leg, except what happens when you just put in this image of working with the hands, the forearms, elbows, triceps, upper back, not narrowing in your wrist, not shifting your weight in your hands. And that's not to say that the weight won't feel different. When one leg goes up, often that same arm feels like it takes a little more weight. So if my left leg goes off, I often feel my left hand pressing a little bit more. And that's because I went from my hand and leg both supporting my weight to only my hand supporting my weight on that side. So if I don't feel more weight in that hand, often means my pelvis has shifted over, has really shifted to the opposite side. If I keep my weight pretty centered, I'm going to feel a difference in how that works. And then both knees down after you finish your next set. Shift your weight back. Feel how your wrist can really open, right? Maybe even lift up to your fingertips and open a little more. And then flip your palm open the other way. Supination. And feel how that feels in your back. And then slide your hands by your knees. We're going to tuck your toes under. Take a little stretch up. And then slowly roll back up to standing. All right. So hopefully that's starting to open up in your upper body a little bit. So let's do a little bit with the weights here. I promised we would talk about rotator cuff a little bit. Always a little nervous to make promises at the beginning of class because I sometimes get different ideas in the middle of class. But let's get into the rotator cuff. So maybe you've heard of that muscle or that group of muscles. It helps create stability in the shoulder joint because the shoulder is a very mobile joint. And then because of that, our muscles create, we need our muscles to create a little more stability. So rotator cuff muscles go from your shoulder blade to your upper arm. That's the main way I think about it. Muscles that start on the shoulder blade and then connect to the upper arm. So if I pull my shoulder blade back, that doesn't actually use those muscles, right? Those are muscles that go from my shoulder blade to my spine. So to get my rotator cuff, I have to leave my shoulder blade in place, and then leaving my shoulder blade in place, move my arm, and usually into rotation is how that happens, and I start to feel those muscles. So again, you could do this with your weights. You could do it without your weights. We're going to take hands up, elbows into your side. I'm going to keep kind of a loose grip on my weight. Doesn't get too forearmy. And then leaving my shoulder blades in place, not letting them slide back. Just going to start to rotate open. And as I do that, I start to feel my triceps, the back of my arm, but it's also like I feel the back of my armpit a little bit. That often feels like the rotator cuff. And then if I go higher than the armpit to the upper back of the shoulder, that's definitely my rotator cuff. Now, not pulling the ribs out, letting the collarbone stay wide, and not pulling the blades together, right? Just that rotation. You should reach an edge where it feels like it really, there's just no more in there, right? Even if you don't feel a lot of work, you'll probably reach that edge where you're like, I can't really go any farther. That usually means the muscles have come on, you just don't have a lot of sensation there yet. You'll build sensation as you do it. So we're just going to go out and in, seeing if you can tune into those muscles. Easy neck as you do it, wide collarbones, ribs connected in the front. And one more time, we're going to add on to this second part is I'm going to keep my position, my 90-degree angle, and I'm going to slide the elbows up. Now this one's a little tricky. Sometimes the shoulders have lifted. Think elbows wide to the side of the room. You might need to hold your weight a little more. Notice if your wrists are still straight. Keep them really straight. Now I'm going to try to keep my upper arm exactly where it is and rotate the hands down without lifting my shoulders up, without dropping my elbow or sending my elbow forward and back. And that's how far I get. I don't know how far you get. It can vary, right? Still that wide reach. I'm going to bring my fists together in the front, and then I am back where I started. All right. So that's the rotator cuff series. So you rotate open. You try to find those tricep, back of the armpit, back of the shoulder muscles. And then you try to keep that position in that flat plane as you come up, elbows in line with your shoulders, wide shoulders. And then upper arm is a spigot. Is that what they call it? Like a rotator. It just rotates. Spigot isn't the word. What am I looking for? When you roast a pig at a luau, what do you put it on? To the spigot? Something. Your upper arms are going to rotate like that. And then back in. Open. Rotate up. Float up. Rotate down. What has to happen in your shoulder, that upper arm, really to rotate? With the elbows still lifted. And then hands together. One more time. Again, if this feels like, oh, this is too much on my shoulder, absolutely do this with no weights. It is plenty of work with 0 weights in your hand. Sometimes it's better because you really get into the rotator cuff more. And then back in and rest. Yeah. Oh, and relax all that. Just feel how your head and neck feel. So we got into some other things as well. Some other muscles we got into are abductor muscles, muscles that take my arm straight out to the side and up. Those are also muscles that are sometimes weak. And so instead we do it with the neck, right? Instead of leaving all this still and using the actual abductor, which connects the shoulder and the blade, but you could think of it connecting like the shoulder and the collarbone almost. Like that's your abductor. Sometimes what we do is we lift the whole shoulder to lift the arm, right? Then my neck's lifting my arm. So we're also getting into those muscles through there. It's a great series. Highly recommend it. It's just like a practice to work on, especially if you have any sort of shoulder stuff to make all that support a little better. All right, so then if we go into just kind of some straight bicep work, right? These are pretty light weights. If you have heavier weights and you like to do heavier weights, great. But also maybe you want to stay with light weights a little. Even as we do the bicep curl, we're going to focus on that rotator cuff area, right? So a bicep curl could happen like this. The elbows could go any direction. We're going to try to keep the elbow in place with that kind of rotator cuff feeling, right? We did this. It's almost the same as you straighten the elbow with that rotator cuff feeling. And then keeping the elbow in place so your hand really goes forward to come up. And that's a really different feeling than like splitting and pulling the elbow back to lift the weight, right? So if I keep the elbow in place by my hip, I actually need my biceps a little more. They have to actually work a little harder. And the hardest moment is 90 degrees. That's when the weight's the farthest away from my center. It actually gets a little bit easier as it gets up to my shoulders. And then I get back to 90 degrees, elbows in place. That's kind of the heaviest place for the lever. My rotator cuff is going to help hold my arm in place. My bicep is going to fold the weight in. My upper abdominals are also very helpful. I'm holding my spine in place. And easy neck, open upper back. Last one. And then relax all that. We're going to take the weights down. We're going to go back to the strap. So, shoulder extension is taking the arm back behind you, right? I'm going to work with that a little bit. So, strap behind you or towel behind you, fist point down, back of the hand towards me, towards your screen. And then my shoulder arm muscles are pretty awake. So, I'm going to think just kind of all of those same things, like just being aware of all those muscles as I do a little pull out on the strap. And then I'm going to go back to my forearm awareness and my thumb awareness and my hand awareness and try to not over grip in my hand or over tense in my forearm. Probably a little bit of tension there because I have to hold the strap. But how little do I need? It's the least amount I could use and really hold it. So I have a connection from my hand, wrist, forearm, wide elbow, tricep, upper back, upper abdominals, all those things. And then I just intensify all those feelings by extending the shoulder, taking it back behind me. However far, I keep a sense of integrity in everything I just figured out, right? Meaning I don't break my wrist, I don't lock my elbow, I don't send my shoulder forward or squeeze my blades together. I spend a good amount of time finding my hand, wrist, flowing forearm, tricep, upper back, back at the shoulder. And then I just try to keep all those things. Shoulder extension. It's a lot. Two more. Relax all that. Scott likes to use the term oddly fatiguing. I think this one fits in that category. Oddly fatiguing exercise. And every time, maybe you notice I'm kind of working my neck. All these muscles we're trying to work, if we're doing it well, it should simultaneously be freeing up some of the like stuff in the neck. So it often feels good to me to kind of move my neck around after doing this work and see if there's a little more space in there. All right, we're going to take this back down to the mat. So finding your way down however you like. And then let's actually go onto your back. We're going to do a little shoulder bridge. So we just did shoulder extension, standing up. And maybe it's clear to you already that shoulder extension is in shoulder bridge, maybe not, but it's that same thing as your pelvis comes up in shoulder bridge, your shoulder ends up in extension. We're going to see if we can find that work here in shoulder bridge. So knees bent, feet flat, hands on the floor. So this is just like when I was standing, pulling the strap, getting all the muscular connections set up. Now, when I really do it well, I don't actually feel the back of my shoulder on the floor because my rib cage is round. So if I really have my shoulder lined up, then my shoulder doesn't really press into the floor. It's a little bit off the floor. I feel my hand, I feel some of my forearm. I feel kind of a lightness, a light touch in my elbow, but I'm still thinking about that wide elbow position. maybe a little bit of the back of my arm. Like it's very close to the floor, but it's not pushing the floor. So what does that feel like to you? See if you can find that feeling of connecting like you did when you were standing. And then from there, we're going to keep all that as we work through the pelvis, the lower back, the rib cage, the upper rib cage, into your shoulder bridge, and keeping all that connection in the arms, rolling back down. And then ease up on that feeling a little. We'll reset the whole thing. So one thing that's nice is the palm of my hand is open again. I don't have to worry about like gripping anything. That makes me really feel my forearm. It's pronation, right? It's in that pronation, palms down position. It just feels a little nicer than having to hold on to something. I feel like I can open that up a little more. Triceps, back of the armpit, wide shoulder blades, ribs in the front, and all that working as I roll up through my spine. Pressing the feet, all the things you know about shoulder bridge still apply. Just a focus the upper back, the upper body. And rolling back down. And one more time. And then relax. And you can flip your palms open if you want. It does tend to be a little easier to have the palms up and feel the chest open. And so sometimes that feels nice after you're done moving. And then coming up to sitting. All right, so we were standing, we were doing our bicep curl. I said the hardest, kind of most weight was when the elbow was at 90 degrees, right? And we kind of practiced that movement in the bicep curl. We're going to take that feeling into a push-up, modified or full or whatever that is. We're going to play around with that feeling there. So let's go onto your hands and knees again. Find your nice hands and knees position, wherever that is that we worked on before. Now let's do just straight hands and knees for a moment. And then see if you can feel the elbows going back by your side and sort of to that 90-degree shape. So not super low. It could be less than, I guess it would be more than 90-degree angle. It could be a greater angle than that. You don't have to go super low. But see if you can kind of feel that bicep curl feeling where you have the upper back, the shoulder blades, the triceps, and then you let the elbow sort of bend in towards your waist. Even on hands and knees, right? Like if you do it well, you can feel a pretty good amount of work. Long back of the neck, open upper back, and figure out that rotator cuff feeling. Now, a little more challenge would be to take your hands farther away, go into more of a plank, so your butt drops down now, and you're in that long diagonal position. Now, already in this position, I feel my chest tighten up. So I've got to bend my elbows slightly, take them a little wider, not straight back, so I can find my upper back. And then starting my like 90-degree descent. And then back up. Going super slowly too, right? So I'm sure it's somewhat annoying to some people and some people love it, but Slower is a lot of work, but also allows me to find all these connections. Two more. Abdominals are working to keep my core really lined up. And coming back, take a little rest off your hands and your wrist. All right, so before we go back into this, just to point out, one of the big things that happens right away in push-up for people, I think, is the first thing that happens as they lower is the shoulder blades lose their position. That's the first thing to destabilize on almost everybody I watch do a push-up. And I watch kids in their 20s do push-ups all the time. So this is not just, this is like everybody, this is what we all do. We all kind of lose the shoulder blade position first because it's hard. So one way to deal with that is this upper abdominal connection. There are muscles that start on the deep side of your shoulder blade, on the inner side of your shoulder blade, that wrap around to the side, ribs, and kind of come in like fingers here. They're called serratus anterior muscles. And then right on top of that are external abdominal oblique muscles. They come in, right? And that's why we talk about rib connection. And the serratus anterior muscles are part of holding your shoulder blades in place when you do a movement. So that kind of band wrapping around is really helpful for creating that shoulder stability. Because remember, we need the shoulder stability, shoulder blade stability, so that we can access the rotator cuff more and the tricep more. And if my shoulders move, I can't access those stabilizing muscles. So I'm going to try to keep, I want to try to keep my blade in place when I do my push-up, especially if I'm only going this far. If I go farther, I need to move my blade, but this far I can keep it in place, right? Not this far, but this far, right? And that's all we're doing today. So we're trying to keep the shoulder blade wide and then get into that tricep, bicep, rotator cuff feeling. My upper abdominals are super important with that. So generally smaller is better. I mean, smaller is better to find that particular thing, right? So that little bit. So we're going to go out one more time. Pick what you want. I'm going to add in the option of a full plank position if you want this time, or the half plank, or the hands and knees where your body's parallel to the floor. Any of those are good. I'm going to do the full plank, and I'm going to do even less than 90 degrees in my elbow. I'm going to do just a real small one because that works really well for me. So I'm going to find my ribs. I'm going to find my belly. I'm going to spread out my hands, try to find all those muscles that we've been working on, and really focus on the blades staying in place, not coming together as I bend and straighten. And then bend. I have to do more and more rib connection and straighten. And then the head sometimes sags down. Try to keep your head in line with your spine. Two more. And then resting and coming back. All right, so let's do just a little bit on your side, just to kind of get those obliques in. Maybe give your upper body a rest, but also to feel how your upper body connections maybe help you with some of the sideline work, because they often do. So let's go on to you can go onto your right side and then take your feet a little bit forward. Now, arm straight out from underneath you. How does it feel through all here? I can feel that I've worked. Like it sort of feels nice to try to stretch out my armpit and my arm now through here. And then still feeling like that upper abdominal rib connection coming up. Kind of a nice long reach. Now here we are again with this hand. Palm up is supination. Palm down is pronation. And it's actually a little harder, right? Can you feel in this position? It's kind of hard to get the palm all the way down because you have to release your forearm to do it. It actually requires more flexibility to get your palm down. So it might be something you want to play with. Can you get the palm down? Maybe you go sideways, maybe you go up. Noticing that connection. I'm going to take this top hand, I'm going to spread out your palm nicely. I'm going to press it into the floor, and you're going to think of that tricep rotator cuff, muscles in the upper back of the shoulder supporting you. Now top leg lifts, and all that upper body work is going to help you just stay in place as your leg goes forward and back, right? And it feels different. As I go forward, the muscles come on. As I go back, the muscles have to come on again. It's like the middle is the easiest place. As I get farther back, the more I have to think of kind of rotator cuff, rib stability. Middle is fine. And then as I get more and more forward, press that hand. It's just like the bicep curl. As things get farther from your center, they require more strength to maintain your stability. One more. And then both legs together. Go ahead and let both legs point. We're going to play with the legs coming off the floor. And this is a tricky one, right? Because we use this hand probably when we do it. As you use your hand on the floor, try not to pull your shoulder forward, right? Same muscles you tried to work in the push-up. Now work as you lift both legs and back down, including your ribs joined together. Three more. And then relax all that. Push yourself up. Set up the other side. Feet are forward. Pelvis and upper body, torso, all lined up with the back edge of your mat. Nice long stretch now through your armpit and shoulder. Connect through your ribs. How do you want this hand? Palm up, palm forward, palm down. What does it feel like in the forearm? Sometimes you notice it in your elbow or your wrist. Usually means the forearm isn't really letting go. If you're feeling it more in your elbow or your wrist, just back off to maybe palm forward or palm up. See if you can find that connection through there. Top leg a little lifted, this hand, nice, just like you did in the push-up connection. And then forward. Let that hand help you a little more as you get farther forward. Connect as you take it back into the ribs. And three more times. And then both hands together, or sorry, both legs together. But then, yeah, coordinate your upper body. How does that all connect? And then the legs come off and back down. This side's kind of hard. My shoulder really wants to come forward on this side. And so I'm just taking a little longer to get my legs off. Just need to give my upper body a little more time to organize and work through the hard spot. Two more times. And then relax everything. Then bring yourself up to sitting. All right, so let's do lying on your back. And knees bent, feet flat. And if it's more comfortable for you to let your knees fall in towards each other, that would be fine in this last little breathing we're going to do. Or you can have knees just in line with your hips there. And then let your palms face up to the ceiling. And let them come away from your body. And when your arm and your elbow is in its full relaxed position, like the bones are in their relaxed organization, your arm doesn't make a straight line. There's a little bit of angle at your elbow. So in my neutral bone position, my elbow has a little bit of an angle to it. And maybe you can feel that. Like if you just go from a straight angle from shoulder to finger, and then you shift just a little like you were bending your thumbs towards your shoulders, like moving your thumbs up a little bit, that angle. You might find that position. Um, and it maybe correlates to the position of hands on your belly, when you go in that position, almost coordinates to that angle for me. So just, mess around and see if you can find the most relaxed angle for your arm. And then close your eyes. And pay some attention to your breath and how it's moving through your ribs. Now, you might breathe through your belly naturally, so it might not move through your ribs a lot. But whatever happens in your rib cage, notice it, even if it's that your rib cage is not moving at all. And then just like lightly suggest to your body to let the breath move through the ribs and the chest and the upper back a little more, whatever is missing in your breath, if anything is. And then start to observe out from that space. So from the ribs, feeling a little bit of flow and movement there. Notice what it feels like in the chest, collarbones, shoulder blade muscles, any of those. Maybe they can relax a little more. And then follow that through the biceps and the triceps, which are muscles all around the upper arm, the front and back of the upper arm, down to the elbow. And then keep following that down. What do your forearms feel like? The front of the forearm. Can you feel work or release? And just some awareness in that part of your body. And then back of the forearm, maybe you feel on the floor and have some sensation there. How is that feeling? Way through your wrists. Could your wrists relax a little more? And then notice the palm of your hand. Don't worry about your fingers or your thumb. A perfectly relaxed hand is not necessarily a flat palm or a flat fingers. The fingers always curl a little bit. So don't worry about that, but just notice the palm of your hand and imagine that relaxes a little more in the back of your hand, what's touching the floor, that relaxes a little more. And then just kind of noticing down to your fingers. Maybe they wiggle a little bit. And then just take a couple breaths, feeling your whole upper body from your rib cage, your breath, all the way down to your fingertips. And then, however you like, working your way out of that position and back up to sitting. Hey, folks. So thanks for being here today. Scott is off, as I mentioned, he's teaching a half-day meditation retreat in Madison. And next week as well, he will be doing his own retreat. So he will not be here and we'll be on our own again. And then we'll see him uh, the week after. So I'm going to check, see if there's any questions. I have to figure out how to do that again. Great. Yeah, so it looks like the chat is pretty quiet, as Scott likes to say. So thanks for being here and see you next week.